Taking a look back at Bitcoin, you see when we have broken this previously zone of support to the downside, it was pretty much a flash crash. Now, this is to be expected considering this zone has held us up since the beginning of the year, and usually the stronger the resistance or support, when we break it to either the upside or downside, it has a stronger move in that direction. So considering that this was relatively strong support, we had a pretty strong crash to the downside when we broke it. Here you can see that we pretty much found support at this green box of support down here. We have also reset the RSI on the daily. So I suspect we'll see somewhat of a bounce here, likely to the bottom of this red box of resistance and then a further move down. And this is because if we take a look at the longer time frames here on the weekly chart and the 200 EMA, if you turn it on, you can see that Bitcoin respects this line throughout its history. Every time we've come down to touch it, it's pretty much sent us in a new bull run. Now you can also see that anytime we do come down to touch it, it's pretty much magnetic to this level. Here you can see there was a line of support, and when we broke it to the downside, it was pretty much instantaneous. Same thing around here. There is somewhat of a line of support around this range, and then we blew through it to the downside. And same thing back here. We had a line of support. We broke it to the downside, and it was pretty much almost instantaneous. Turn on the EMA ribbon here on the weekly, you can actually see we have wicked off of the 200 EMA. So I have a sneaking suspicion that we'll likely come back up here for somewhat of a fake out, or not even a fake out, but a dead cat bounce, kind of get people excited again, and then we'll have that final move all the way down to the 200 moving average on the weekly. Take a look at the Ichimoku cloud and the EMA ribbon on the daily chart. You can see that the Ichimoku cloud is relatively far away from us and pretty thin, so I'm not too concerned about it at this moment. The EMA ribbon is catching up with the price action, which is a good sign. So we really need to find that bounce relatively soon, or else we're probably going to see something like this, where we have somewhat of a bear flag and then move further down. Something pretty interesting is happening here on the 4 hourly. If you look here, it looks like we're forming a inverse head and shoulders pattern. If you draw a line like this, you can see that this is the neckline, and we have something like this: shoulder, head, shoulder. Now what we can do is take a price range from the neckline to where this wick down to the bottom, and we can extrapolate the price data upwards. Say we break out relatively soon, right about here. You can see that it's pretty much targeting the bottom of this red box. Now, I've mentioned in the past, I don't really like using these price targets a whole lot, but I do like to see where the price could potentially end up. We could very well end up at the 200 EMA here on the 4 hourly before we see a rejection, or even the Ichimoku cloud before we see a rejection. But in most cases, that line is probably going to be the max. So we do find a move to that red box, we're probably going to find some pretty gnarly resistance off of it. You see on the 4 hourly, we have been testing the EMA ribbon quite a bit, and actually have been having some moves above it throughout this range, ultimately to get sent lower by the Ichimoku cloud. Here you can see we've been testing the EMA quite a bit again, so we could very well break it to the upside this time. But again, we do have the Ichimoku cloud ahead of us, and the last time we have touched it, both times actually, back here, I don't know if you can see this, but back here, we have had a move to the downside, right? So it's just something to keep in mind. If we do bust out of here, we could very well get rejected off the Ichimoku cloud again. But considering it is relatively thin right here, Bitcoin has somewhat of a narrow window to break this to the upside. If we take a look at the fear and greed index, yesterday it was at 9, today it's at 10. If we look at the history of this, it doesn't really stay down here for very long. You see that anytime we come down to these levels, we have a move up relatively quickly. And sometimes it does kind of hang out down here before we have the move. If you look here, we've been hanging out around here for quite some time. On the hourly chart, it looks like we're actually broken above the EMA ribbon and are currently trying to break above the Ichimoku cloud, which is a good sign. The Ichimoku cloud is turning green right here after being red ever since we moved out of this zone of support. So really Bitcoin doesn't have much time here before it needs to make a decision and move out of this. If not, we'll probably just see something like this and then have a further move down, ultimately making this pattern invalid. So I have this red line marked here, which is around where the 200 weekly moving average is. So in my opinion, I think we'll probably find a bounce here, either reject somewhere around here off of the EMA ribbon, or all the way up at the red box of resistance before we find the move to the 200 weekly moving average. The best case scenario for this is if we find a rejection off here and find a double bottom off of this box. But considering that the 200 weekly moving average is pretty magnetic in terms of the price action, again, we move down here relatively quickly when we break support. I have a feeling that it's probably going to be something like this, where we have a final push to the upside and then a final move to the downside. So if you're playing long here, I would probably be taking some profits at around the first EMA ribbon here, which is sitting around 34.2. And additionally, I'd probably set 25% of the rest of my trade to exit all the way up here at around 38K. And we definitely have the potential to move all the way up to the top of this red box at around 41K before we see that rejection. And ultimately, if we break this green box of support to the downside and really close down here instead of having somewhat of a wick, we could see something like this where we break through to the downside, test it as resistance, and then find that further move down. And the 200 weekly moving average is sitting around $21,000 to $22,000. As time goes on, the 200 weekly moving average is going to start moving up again. So if this takes a couple weeks, this could very well be a bottom at around $24,000. We'll just have to see what happens. This is all I have for Bitcoin today. If you enjoyed this video, go and hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed already, go and do so, as I try to post content daily. As always, this is not financial advice. I'll see you in the next one.